Chapter 16. I lay flat on my stomach in bed. It was still dark and quiet, but a different sort of dark and quiet. A bird chirped. A child laughed. I stood and drew back the curtain. Bright sunlight poured in, blinking, squinting. I took in the yard below, the green woods around the house. Beyond that rolled dark green hills and more woods until alternating patches sloped into steep purple-gray mountains. For sun that bright in winter, it must have been midday. Midday? I was late on my very first day. I tried to straighten my clothes, which were rumpled from the train, and then from sleeping in them. There wasn't any hope of fixing my braids, so I just smoothed the loose strands behind my ears. No one was along the hallway to ask where to go. I spent a minute in the washroom, then thundered down the nearest stairs, and the next set after that, and raced down the main staircase toward the grand foyer. And there was the examiner. I froze on the steps. What could I say to apologize for oversleeping? But she smiled and said, Mathilde, welcome to Phaeter. Did you have a good rest? Come on, it's time for your haircut. My what? Haircut. Come on. Oh no, I hadn't got my braids in order, and now they were going to chop them off. I scurried to keep up with her as she left the foyer and headed down the hallway lined with closed doors. She pushed the one open. There was Miss Ibsen, looking refreshed and not as if she had been driving pony carts in the night. She sat at the desk, tapping something out on a typewriter. Mathilde for her haircut, the examiner said. Oh, she said, hopping up. Mathilde, how was your sleep? Good. They both remained silent, waiting for me to continue. Why do I have to get my hair cut? We feed you and wash your clothes, but we can't be chasing after all of you to brush your hair every day. Short, so you can take care of it yourself. No fuss, please, the examiner said. Miss Ibsen set newspaper on the floor and placed a wooden chair over it. She got sharp silver scissors and a comb from her desk and stood by the chair. No fuss. It was like sitting for another test. I took a deep breath and sat down. Miss Ibsen's touch was even more gentle than Mother's as she loosened my braids and combed out my hair. The scissors snipped loudly. I kept my head down, watching my blonde tails collect on the floor. After a time, Miss Ibsen set aside the scissors and pulled some of the hair from the top of my head to one side, tying it there so to keep it out of my eyes. She handed me a mirror. I think it looks nice, she said. My hair was cut just above my shoulders. It didn't look as blonde with the ends cut off. With the tails went the sun-bleached hours of summer. A lump rose in my throat as I looked away from the mirror and down at the hair on the floor. Come, Mathilde, the examiner said, but she spoke more kindly than she had before. I forced a weak smile at Miss Ibsen, who was smiling at me, and I scooted to keep up with the examiner. Maybe I was finally going to find out what this was all about, what the test had been for and why I'd come all this way and had my hair chopped, my new job. You will rise and dress by 8 every morning, said the examiner. 8 to 8:30. There's a brisk walk around the grounds. 8:30, breakfast, lunch at noon. 2 to 3 is playtime outside. That's mandatory and very important. We need to keep this place looking like a school, and exercise keeps your mind sharp. Dinner at 6. In your room by 10. Lights out is up to you, though keep your curtains pulled. We expect you to rest well each night so that you are fresh for your daytime activities. Like playtime? Had we come here just to disguise this place as a school? I was almost running to keep up as she continued along the hallway, but then she turned into an enormous living room. It was full of kids playing board games, shouting, laughing, arguing, moving pieces, setting them up in a different way, going back to the way they were before, walking between the boards to move the pieces to other boards, changing the moves other people had just made, answering telephones at stations along the walls, calling out to others around a board game who would move the pieces, argue some more. Despite the noise, the room had an intensity of deep concentration. Some people were quiet, reading, studying maps. A few adults walked around the room, observing, asking questions, but not giving direction or orders. They weren't interfering at all. What do you want me to do? I asked. Observe, try things out, see what interests you. You may also read anything you see in here or in your room. Lunch will be served shortly. You must be hungry. I was, though I had been so distracted I hadn't noticed until she mentioned it. Then she left me. Okay. I had been instructed to observe, but not to stand frozen like a statue in the middle of the entryway. I tiptoed in. I spotted a Nevi sitting alone on her couch staring at her board game, just as she had been last night. Her hair was cut like mine, I realized. She even had the same lock of hair pulled away from her eyes. So did all the other girls in the room. How had these girls looked before? Had they all had long hair like mine? Had it felt strange to them too, to have it cut? I ran my hand through mine, my fingers tingling as they met the fresh edges. Nevi also ran her hands through her hair, gripping it near her scalp from time to time, but she wasn't thinking about her hair, just about her game. I took the chair across from her. Hi, Mathilde. She hadn't looked up. Hi. I studied the board too. It wasn't a game. It was a grid, with a faint sort of map underneath. Little red ships sat on top. So, what are you good at? Nevi asked, not taking her eyes off the board. Me? Yes, you. Nothing. She looked up then. Her green-brown eyes met mine. You have to be good at something. She looked back down and slid one of the red ships over 2 places, paused, and then slid it back. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. I'm not. She looked up, a bit bewildered, as if I was playing stupid. Her gaze moved from me to a girl absorbed in a fat military book. Frederica can remember anything she reads. Anything. Her gaze moved to a tall boy who seemed to be giving out directions at 2 or 3 board tables at once. Tommy? He can hold multiple formations in his head at once and see the patterns they share. She nodded toward the shorter, slightly chubby boy on a telephone. Hamlin, expert at languages, fluent in 7, could learn a new one between now and dinner time. He can take any incoming message and translate it, even in code. See her over there, the napping girl? Yes, she, not napping, deciphering. Reads the messages, a whole bunch of them, closes her eyes, sometimes for hours. But when she opens them, message is clear. Get it? I felt cold all the way through to my stomach. There must have been a mistake. I couldn't even picture Meg's fitting in here. These kids were all super geniuses. But Nevi was staring at the board again. I stared too. What did she see? Or rather, it seemed what she wasn't seeing something. What could I see? Nothing but little red ships. Sometimes a shape stood out, a triangle here or there. But I didn't even know what I was supposed to see. Are there ships all traveling together in this formation? No, it's just 3 ships, shown over time. Nevi rocked back and forth slightly. Her fingers gripped her hair, tight along her scalp. Then she was still again. We both went back to staring. After several minutes, Nevi swept all the pieces off the board in one movement, sending them flying across the room. I blinked and sat back. I looked around, but nobody else had reacted. Nevi plopped back down and stared at the blank board. Then she stood up, triumphant relief on her face, and shouted, Tommy, call downstairs. Check 3D. All of them in 3D. Excellent, Nevi, excellent. Tommy grabbed the nearest telephone, dialed, and said into it, Nevi thinks she's got them. Check 3D. Okay. He hung up and called to Nevi. We should know in 8 hours. She nodded and sank back onto her sofa, breathing as if she'd run several miles. One of the adults came over. Well done, Nevi. Can I have the next one? Collect your ships from the floor, and then rest until lunch. Why don't you show Mathilde to the art room? Nevi crawled around, not paying attention to where other people were stepping as she found her ships. I grabbed the ones near me and handed them to her when she came back. Come on, Nevi said to me in a sort of resigned way. Once we were in the hallway, she said, The Proctors are big on recreation around here. They seem to think it's healthy to visit the art room. You can go whenever you like. No one would stop you if you said you needed to go to the art room. She made it sound like going to the washroom. a necessity, and so private your decision to go there wasn't even to be questioned. Nevi led me down a dark hallway, away from where I'd gotten my hair cut, toward the other side of the house. She opened the door to a room with large windows, several tables, a paint-splattered sink, and shelves of art supplies, more than I'd ever seen. Go ahead, you can use anything you like. I took familiar things, white paper, paintbrushes, and watercolors, and filled a small jar with water from the sink. I sat at a table and started to paint back the summer, smooth green hills, bright trees. And Evie took a bunch of blank newspaper and balled it up. Then she mixed thick blue and white paint to make a baby blue and brushed it sloppily all over the newspaper ball. I was staring at this mess when one of the proctors came in. Lovely girls, what are you making? The world, Evie said. The world is mostly water, so it probably looks blue from far away. That's insightful, Evie. Mathilde, have you drawn where you're from? Sort of. I shook my head, still unused to the lightness of shorter, freer hair. It's lunchtime, the woman said. Evie disappeared at once. The proctor continued to look at me kindly and seemed quite interested in my painting. Is it finished? I think so, I said. Wonderful. There we go. She pinned my painting to the otherwise bare wall of the art room. Why haven't you hung up anyone else's artwork? Theirs tends not to be flat. She looked over at Evie's abandoned world. Flat would not have been a good word in the art room back at school. Flat things lacked depth. Did she think my picture was boring? It was just a landscape, not even a real place. But she'd hung it up and was studying it, as if it was very interesting. I looked at it more closely. In the center of the trees was a gap where two girls belonged. Two girls holding hands, one leading the other. Are you all right? The woman asked me. Just hungry, I guess. Lunch was in a large dining hall with long tables. Each place was set with a sandwich on a plate and a glass of milk. Kids elbowed and bumped into each other as friends looked for seats together and swapped plates for a reason I couldn't understand yet. I sat in front of an untouched plate and realized I hadn't eaten since the train, which seemed like a long time from another life. The sandwich was chopped egg. I devoured it and gulped down the milk. The girl across from me stared at me as I wiped my mouth on my sleeve. Don't worry, said the girl next to me. We were all hungry when we got here, but you'll get plenty now. It's not like back home. I'm Céline. Mathilde. I'm Brid, said the girl across from me. So, what happens here? I asked. Just what you see happen, Céline said carefully. And Evie solved some kind of puzzle, and they called the answer downstairs. Oh, did she solve it? Céline asked. She's been on that one all week. No one could figure out what had become of those dive-knots. They weren't showing up on any scans. Dive-knots? Deep undersea boats. Tommy said they'd know in 8 hours. She rarely misses, Céline said. She's probably right. I peered down the table at Evie, who had taken her sandwich apart and was eating it from the inside out, laughing as she talked with some boys. What's downstairs? Grown-ups, Brid said. They get the incoming calls and place the outgoing ones. They have I shook my head. Brid and Céline looked at each other, and then back at me. Big decoding machines, Céline whispered. Downstairs is also where we go if the bombers fly over. It's under 3 layers of concrete and steel. Do we go down there a lot? Never, Céline said, neatly biting her sandwich. But I've heard there's enough food stored for all of us to live on for 3 years. 3 years? Yeah. So if Tissia comes, we can stay here, pretending to be a school, and keep doing our work. Bring them down from inside. My sandwich must have gotten stuck in my throat. I wished I had more milk. What have they asked you to do? Brid asked. Nothing yet. Stick with Tommy, Céline said. You can learn a lot from him. He can do everything, and all at once. Tommy had been the center of a huge flurry of activity, not really where I wanted to be. When we went back upstairs, an extremely anxious Evie was soothed with coordinates of new ships to set up. I sat across from her and watched her slide ships into their formations. Maybe if I saw the puzzle from the beginning, I could solve it. But I didn't understand this one any better than the last. I followed Anevi and the others outside at playtime. Anevi marched over to a crowd huddled around one boy with a bag. The kids were all twisting away to reach blindly into the cloth sack, pulling out strips of fabric. Most of them exclaimed or groaned when they saw the colors of their bands, but started tying them around their arms. The bands were either twisted black and orange or white and aqua blue. "What is this?" I asked Anevi, who was now tying a white and blue band around my arm. "Tissia tag. Those other armbands used to be black. Ceylin made us new ones with orange after Tissia joined with Arrowburn. And the blue and white was of our own seafaring country." "You have to get the other country's armbands. The country who gets all the other armbands wins." "They make you play war games at playtime?" "Make us?" And Nevi looked mystified. "No, we made this up. Run, go." I ran. We could run anywhere we wanted, as long as we stayed within the walls, but there was plenty of space and trees. Running felt good, despite the cold. My heart and lungs worked to keep up with my feet. As I grew warmer and felt the air on my face and legs, summer wasn't that far away. Summer, when Megs and I could run in the woods like this. I ran so fast, no one claimed my armband, and I forgot about it. I'd come to fight in the war. I was far from home and the people I loved, but it was so different from the war I knew. Aerials and bombing, empty stomachs, the anxiety of what could happen at any time. Instead of being brought closer to the war, it seemed I had been brought farther away. After playtime, I pinned up my sister's handprints in my room. The hardest thing about the distance from the war was not being able to tell Mother and Father I was safe. Would they worry constantly, or would they choose to believe I was all right? They probably would believe I was safe. That had been the whole point of sending me. And so far, it seemed true. A pit formed in my stomach. Why should I be safe when the people I loved couldn't be? And I wasn't anything like these kids. I wasn't smart like they were. I didn't really belong. Megs had said there had to be something only I could do. She was usually right. So if she thought there was something I could do, maybe there was. Father had said to help bring the war to an end, and then I could go home. I wanted him to be proud of me. I'd take Ceylin's advice, stick with Tommy, and see if I couldn't be useful at something.